Hello, wild people. Welcome to AK Wild One. Are you an older hiker who has a hankering to abandon the rocking chair and start rocking the high country? Well, you've come to the right place. Today, I'm going to share 14 improved tips to help older hikers succeed on long-distance hikes. Thank you for tuning into this episode. You know, if you see an older hiker on the trail, chances are they've got a few pieces of advice up their puffy jackets. The ability to maintain the backpacking passion into those golden years requires a different mindset compared to that of a younger hiker. So here are my 14 additional tips for older hikers that came to me while I was hiking through Oregon and Northern California this past summer. Tip number 1, enjoy the training process. Make sure you enjoy the process, because if your training seems too much like work, you'll have a harder time enduring the rigors of the trail. Be prepared for the notion that your days won't always be idyllic and there will be hardships along the way. But the good news is those bad days are temporary, and they'll help make the good days seem that much better. Try to find the silver lining when you're miserable during training. The ability to see the positive in moments that seem to suck will serve you well on the trail. Even when I was miserable from the heat I endured on the trail, I still knew there were perhaps millions of people across the world who wish they had the good fortune and the good health to switch places with me and be on a grand adventure. When I struggled up a pass, I also reminded myself that it was a blessing to be growing older, but to still be in good enough shape to enjoy the outdoors. I knew that when I got home, I'd forget about the hardships, or they wouldn't seem as bad as what they were when I experienced them, and I'd have a lot of fond memories to look back on in my life. Tip number 2, recognize that building your trail legs takes time. Rome wasn't built in a day, the saying goes, and the same is true with your trail legs. It's important not to force the process by hiking too many miles before you're ready. This summer, it took me about 400 miles before I felt like my trail legs were engaged and solid. We stayed steady at 15 miles a day before we increased to 20 miles and more during our hike. For some older hikers, it takes 300 to 500 miles to build solid trail legs. Achieving your trail legs is the stage when your legs feel almost invincible, almost indestructible. Blisters are healed, lingering aches have all but disappeared, and your knees can handle uphill and downhill without any pain. Also, hiking more than 20 miles a day with a full pack doesn't even faze you. It's like your legs are in overdrive. It's almost like the difference between riding a bike with flat tires and riding on tires with just the correct pressure. Your legs feel solid and dependable and low maintenance. That's not to say that blisters or leg injuries can't happen after you've hiked 500 miles. They sometimes do, but it's less likely when your trail legs have formed. As you get older, I think the process of developing your trail legs takes more time than when you were younger, even if you've done some excellent training prep before your hike. Tip number 3, don't compare yourself to younger hikers. It's a losing battle. Most younger hikers under 40 will tell you they hike 30 miles or more a day. And if you're hiking that many miles as a 50, 60, 70, or 80-year-old, then I stand in awe of you. However, the bottom line is it would be a mistake for us to tether our self-esteem to the habits of others, especially younger hikers. Once you find your groove, whether it's 10 miles a day or 25 miles a day, be satisfied with that. Think about how amazing it is that as an older hiker, you're doing good things for yourself. You're not really competing against anyone but yourself. Think about how far you've come from the couch to the summit. Tip number 4, learn to hike smarter, not tougher. Hopefully, as we get older, we've acquired a bit of wisdom. That means learning to hike more strategically. For example, Flash and I learned to hike across snowfields early in the morning to prevent burning up precious calories and mental energy by post-holing. Post-holing is when your feet punch through the top layer of snow, and that usually occurs during the heat of the day. Flash and I were also flexible and changed our routine when the temperatures reached into the 90s and the hundreds. We would flip to sections above 5,000 feet where it was cooler, or hike early in the morning, plan major ascents for the mornings or the evenings, and take midday siestas near streams or lakes so we could cool off. Also, if the rivers are high, we would try to time our crossings for early mornings because that's when the rivers are usually lower, unless, of course, it rains at night. Tip number 5, get rid of unnecessary gear. They say backpackers pack their fears, and I think that's true. During the summer, I packed too many clothes, and I realized that I basically only needed a pair of hiking shorts, a hiking hoodie, socks, and a light fleece jacket like the one I'm wearing. After several weeks, I sent my long underwear and puffy jacket home and learned to carry less food. I learned how many energy bars I ate in a day, and I realized I only needed to carry one extra day of food on the trail to feel secure. You could also send your extra clothing ahead on the trail using a USPS flat rate box if you worry you might still need it during your trip. Tip number 6, focus on memories, not miles. When you're on the trail, focus on the process of hiking, not the result. Most hikers gauge the success of their trip based on how many miles they hike. One hiker I met said she got very depressed when she reached the midway point because she knew she still had 1,300 miles ahead of her. This year, since we were walking south, we took more time to talk with nobos, or hikers, going north. I really enjoyed the conversations I had. Each day I would connect with 1 or 2 hikers, and we shared stories of the trail, stories about our home, and why we were hiking the trail. There seemed to be a lot of people from different countries on the trail, and so I also learned a few things. These conversations helped me in a variety of ways. First off, I enjoyed connecting with young people because, well, I am young at heart. It also helped me to understand that the challenges I faced were not unique. Others were experiencing similar challenges, and that caused me to be less hard on myself on the trail. Tip number 7, practice good nutrition. During my summer trip, I tried to make sure that I ate between 300 to 500 calories for breakfast and snacked through the day rather than consuming too much food at one time, which would have caused me to have stomach aches. I ate 2-person dehydrated meals at the end of the day, and when I went to town, I tried to quickly shift to eating salads and fruits because I knew that would help replace some of the nutrients and vitamins that I was missing on the trail. I also made sure to add electrolyte mixes to my water, such as Nun tablets or liquid IV, in order to maintain electrolyte replacement. I also made sure to camel up in the morning and drink water before I became thirsty. Tip number 8, consider short breaks instead of long breaks. This summer I tried to maximize my hiking between 4 a.m. and 10 a.m. and that meant enjoying shorter 10-minute breaks rather than taking longer breaks. That system seemed to prevent my muscles from tightening up too much, and it allowed me to make more progress during the cooler morning hours. Tip number 9, master the art of the siesta on hot days. The trail decides became something of a mantra for me. I knew I'd have to adjust to the realities of hiking in hot conditions. So on those excruciating days, we started limiting our hiking time between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. Before hiking 6,000 feet up Sade Pass, I got up at 3 a.m. and I started to enjoy night hiking. Tip number 10, practice crossing over blowdowns. In some places, you might have to cross over hundreds of blowdowns, especially in Oregon and Northern California and Northern Washington. Crossing blowdowns with a pack requires balance, agility, foot placement skills, and during the process of crossing over a blowdown, you can be prone to many injuries. I'm not sure of any exercises that simulate the skills required for blowdowns, but maybe climbing stairs with a pack might help. Tip number 11, increase your heat resilience. My greatest fear on the trail is how I will cope with the heat. I actually prefer hiking in temperatures around 40 degrees, and I realize I'm very unique in that department. But I also found that I learned to cope with the heat as my physical shape improved by using a variety of strategies, which I'll share with you in a future video. Tip number 12, train in uncomfortable conditions. Before you set out, don't just hike the good days. Learn to hike in the rain, when it's hot, snowy, sleet, and other times when you really don't feel like hiking. Each time you overcome adversity or difficult conditions, you build up your pain and misery baseline, so that when you experience that same level of misery on the trail, you'll have already overcome something similar, and you're less likely to be beaten down. I've learned to view bad days as temporary, and I found happiness in the trail's simple mercies. I remember finding a water seep in a stretch where I thought I would run out of water, or when the clouds blocked the sun during a hot stretch. I learned to be thankful for those simple mercies on the trail. Even when I was turned back due to smoke at Hart's Pass for the second year in a row, I didn't get upset. I was thankful for all the good things that broke my way during the trip. Tip number 13, don't shave water weight. Always carry a little more than what you think you'll need. Running out of water is a bummer, and I experienced that sensation on a couple of occasions, and it wasn't pleasant. Sometimes the reports on Far Out are dated or just wrong, and if you hit a place where there's supposed to be water and there isn't, you might be in trouble. The only solution I can think of is to carry at least 1 liter more than you think you'll need, and be sure to camel up before leaving a good water source. Tip number 14, be ready to respond to first aid situations. I mentioned in my last video that having some solid first aid training is essential when you're a long distance hiker. I recommend completing at a minimum an EMT1 and wilderness first aid. Then make sure you can recognize the symptoms and provide first aid treatment for some of the situations you might encounter on the trail. Situations such as blisters, sprains, plantar fasciitis, shin splints, heat exhaustion or heat stroke, hypothermia, snake bites, ticks, mosquitoes and other insects, scrapes, abrasions, dehydration, altitude sickness, just to name a few. Please list any other ailments or injuries you think a long-distance hiker should be prepared to respond to. Well, wild people, I hope you found this latest episode on tips for older hikers to be helpful. As always, I appreciate your comments. This is my 3rd video on tips for older hikers, and if you're interested, please watch the other 2 listed in the description. With that, it's time to get moving. None of us are getting any younger. What are we waiting for? Maybe one day our paths will cross. And so, until we meet again, live wildly, my friends.